Well, hello, everyone, and welcome. I have a very special guest with us here this morning, the founder of the People's Party of Canada, Maxime Bernier. And for those of you who are a little less familiar with Maxime was a former cabinet minister under the Harper administration, has a background in law, finance, and banking, and of course had run for the Conservative Party of Canada for the leadership with a very narrow loss, I think due to some milk conglomerates, but that's a different story. And of course, he has some expertise, I think, that is going to shed some light on today's topic, which is the Alberta Pension Plan. Welcome, Maxime.
Thank you, Nadine. I'm very pleased to be with you. And yes, I'm very also happy that we had this opportunity to have the discussion about more autonomy for Alberta.
Love it. Well, we're going to get started with. I just would love to know your very first reaction when you heard that Alberta had said, "That's it. We are going to put this to referendum, and we are going to put it and let Albertans decide whether or not they want to stay in the Canada Pension Plan or they want to start their own."
Yeah, I was very happy with that. And, I'm supporting that because Alberta must be able to be like Quebec. We have our own pension plan. And as you know, Nadine, I believe in a radical decentralization in Ottawa. And every province must be able to have their own pension plan, their own police forces, and all that. So for me, I said, yes, that's a good idea, and I hope that you'll be successful.
Now, I think you're probably the only person politically at this level who agrees with that statement, because I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall when Justin Trudeau and Chrystia Freeland got that news, because they weren't very long in turning around that first finance meeting with all the provincial ministers. And what do you think the federal government's reaction to this proposal was?
But I was not surprised of their reaction. The Trudeau government and every national politicians in Ottawa right now, they want more control from Ottawa. And same thing with the Conservative Party of Canada. Poilievre is not speaking about that because he agrees with Trudeau and the Liberal government. They want to have a Canadian pension plan for every province except Quebec. And for me, I was not surprised of that. I was not surprised of the reaction of the NDP and the Bloc Québécois and also the Conservative. But you must fight because you have the right to control your own destiny.
That's fantastic. So, for a lot of people here, they have been discussing whether or not Alberta does have the legal authority, the right, the provincial jurisdiction to do this. Now, I mean, you've worked in government, you've held a high position. What's your opinion, your view on that?
But I must say in the beginning that I may understand a little bit why the federal government and the Conservative Party of Canada don't want to have a discussion about it. Uh, Also, because that will have an impact on other provinces, not Quebec, because we have our own pension plan, but it will have an impact on Ontario and other provinces because you will have to discuss and have a negotiation about what will be the percentage of the fund that you'll have. And so that's a big discussion, and they don't want to have that discussion. They don't want to sit at your table to have that discussion. We are ready to have that discussion. We, the People's Party of Canada, and that referendum is also important in that context to give Alberta more power at the negotiation table. So for me, I believe that you have the constitutional right to do it. And what is good for Quebec must be good for every other province.
I like that. Now, you did mention that Quebec has its own pension plan. Quebec never opted into the Canada Pension Plan. And when you look at some of the interviews today, people have been trying to fearmonger a little bit about, this has never been done. But I don't think this is rocket science. I mean, as somebody myself, as a chartered investment manager, there are a ton of private investment funds and other pension funds that manage this type of money in this type of structure, and it can certainly be done. But for a lot of people, they're worried about the interprovincial movement between people and people who are out of the country. And I do believe there are already agreements in place. Do you think that the federal government would negotiate in good faith to extend these agreements to Alberta?
They will have to. They will have to. After a decision from your government, they will have to. What the federal government is doing right now is just uh, they try to just scare you about the process, but it's only a process, and everything can be solved if you are in good faith. And right now, I believe that the federal government is not in good faith. They don't want to sit at your table, and it's the same case for climate change and other other big issues that you have in Alberta. So nothing can stop you if you decide to do it, and you'll find the legal path to be able to have what you want. Actually, you have a nice precedent. Quebec. I know that we were never part of that in the beginning, but it's a little difference. We just have to have a negotiation about which amount will be part of your plan, which how much money you're gonna have to leave that system. That's the negotiation. But that being said, after that, everything is possible, and there's no way that the federal government can stop you.
So, is that what you see as truly the biggest sort of piece to the because the way I look at it, the way the Life Works report, which is Bill Morneau's company, former liberal finance minister, so I would think he knows a little bit about what he's talking about. When he talked about how they came up with the calculation, and, Alberta is claiming 53% of the Canada Pension Plan, the assets. And, I don't think it was unrealistic or unreasonable, the equation that they use. All the contributions that have come in, with any of the investment returns, less any contributions, benefits that have gone out, and our proportionate administration fees. So, realistically, what is left for the federal government to negotiate?
Yeah, actually, they what the federal government is doing, Nadine, right now is they don't want to be serious about that, and they will be serious when they will have more pressure coming from your province. And I understand maybe 53% it's huge. I don't know. I'm not an expert. I didn't look at the formula and the way that they calculate that. But it's a question of sitting at the same table, looking at a way to calculate that, and after that just apply that formula. And I don't know, 53%, is it enough, is it not enough, is it 40%? But yeah, it's okay to put on the table all your study, and the federal government must come with another one, and you're going to have a discussion based on that. But when you have that discussion about what will be the amount, it's the first step, and it's the most important step. So I don't know what will be the final decision on that, but you did your homework. You, the Alberta, coming with a proposal. Now the federal government come back with another proposal, and you'll be able to have that discussion.
So, in light of that, what can the federal government do though to really drag this process out, slow it down? Because that's probably my biggest concern is that here's the proposal. Now, the federal government's going to go away, do their number crunching, and come back with something. I mean, I haven't seen this federal government do anything very efficiently when it comes to other provinces. So, what could they do to kind of slow this process down or kind of derail the process?
But the first thing that they can do is telling you that you don't have the approval of your own population. and maybe they can do they can do a referendum with their questions and try to have another uh, another outcome of all that. They can also say, you don't have they kind of find a lot of excuses. That's the federal government. But my advice to you will be, first, you must have a strong approval from Albertans. Second, you must try to have also the official opposition. The Conservative Party of Canada must have a position on that. If you have the Conservative Party of Canada, that is the official opposition today, and that may be part of the platform of Pierre Poilievre before the next election. That's an important question. People in Alberta, they must know what Poilievre will do if he's prime minister. And if you look at the polls, I believe that he can be prime minister in 2025. So I don't think that the Liberal government will solve that. They will find excuses not to have any discussion. So you must focus on the Conservative Party of Canada. And by the way, in Alberta, you're voting for the Conservative all the time. It's 75% of support. So I hope that Poilievre won't take your vote for granted. And my that must be because in 2 years, Poilievre can be in government and he can be able to solve that for the better for Alberta and Canada. So put your pressure on the official opposition, because I don't think that Trudeau will be able to solve that, or he doesn't want to solve that before 2025.
Yeah, I'm not overly optimistic that Pierre Poilievre would be interested in having that conversation with us either. As I think, if Alberta were to withdraw from the Canada Pension Plan, it's kind of like us taking our money away on equalization. I think it certainly will have an impact, and I think the other provinces might be somewhat, I guess, nervous, I guess is probably the best word, in that. So, applying pressure, sure, but I think the likelihood of garnering support from anybody, I think, in government would be pretty small. You tend to agree with that, or?
But it would be difficult first. I agree with you. But on that subject, the People's Party of Canada is your ally. I'm working with you on that, and I will put pressure. I said that at the last electoral campaign. About the equalization formula, like you said. We were the only national political party, and still the same, saying that we must change that formula. We must be less generous. And I'm coming from Quebec, and I'm saying that. And when I'm saying that, it is popular in Quebec when you explain that situation to Quebecers, that it's unfair and they understand it. So that must be the same on the pension plan. You must try to build a strong campaign, and I will be with you at the federal level as the leader, because it is constitutional. It is legal to ask for that, and you must be able to be more independent and being able to have your own pension fund. But Poilievre, that must be a big question that you in Alberta must ask Poilievre all the time. And I know what he will do. He will do some polling and focus group, and he will see that it's very popular in Alberta, but maybe less popular in other provinces. He will have to take voting for the Conservative Party of Canada. What would be the impact for you in Alberta? You have on that file, you'll be able to have a strong decision from him on that. And if he's not taking any position, you'll know what to do at the next election.
Fantastic. Now, one of the things a lot of Albertans have been confronted with is the NDP here, Rachel Notley, claims like, the Danielle Smith government's trying to steal your pension. I mean, when I look at the act and I look how this is written, there is absolutely no way that, a government could steal the pension. And she claims, fake numbers and misrepresentation. And I think, honestly, they're the ones that are just so desperate to, put some water on the fire that is Alberta right now around this. And what's your, I mean, you have that legal background, you have that political background. is there any truth to that statement that the government could steal their pension?
That's another kind of campaign. We saw that with COVID-19, using emotions, using fear to try to change the behavior of Canadians. They did that in COVID-19. Now she's trying to do that, and using that argument, it would be the end of the world if you're doing that. You won't have any pension anymore. But it's not serious. It's not serious, and you must engage and have that discussion with her. And she cannot. You paid for your pension, and you are paying for your pension with your taxes. People will have their pension. I remember the debate about Quebec being independent in the 1980s. If you're independent, it will be the end of the world and blah blah. Actually, they're all using these arguments and telling Quebecers the best ways to stay in Canada, with a radical decentralization and more autonomy for Quebec, but for all provinces. I believe it's the best solution for Quebec, but for the country. So it's only using fear, and without any facts, without any anything to prove that what she's saying is right. But all that, it's fears, and it's a campaign to try to change the behavior of Albertans, and using fear, emotions, not facts and reason.
I totally agree. Now, one of the big things for a lot of people is well, the Canada Pension Plan operates independently. And I'm not sure how familiar you are with the CPPIB, the board that governs, our Canada Pension Plan. But I want to talk a little bit about this independence because being on the inside of government, how influence works. And for me, he who hires, there's an influence there,
Yeah.
obviously. And these CPPIB, the board is actually appointed by the Minister of Finance. So I think there is influence there. And then, of course, you have these government agencies, and I'm going to just reference OFSI, for example, the Office of Superintendent for Financial Institutions. And OFSI has mandated, for example, that the federally regulated, and they manage, insurance, banking, as well as pensions, that they participate in climate exercises, and they are pushing net zero and DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion. So truly, how independent is this board actually operating?
They are and they are not at the same time, because it's the same thing with, you can add the Bank of Canada. The Bank of Canada is supposed to be independent, but every 5 years the federal government gave a mandate to the Bank of Canada. And also, when the federal government is appointing a new governor of the bank, they can give to that new governor some mandate. So it's the same thing for the fund. So yes, they are independent on paper, but they have to report to the government, with their financial statement, and the government, by legislation, can change the mandate of the pension fund. They can. Actually, it's the same thing in Quebec. You have the Caisse de dépôt in Quebec, and they're very independent in their day-to-day operation. That's the most important. They must be independent in their day-to-day operations, and that's the fact for the Caisse de dépôt. So, but when you have a new government in Quebec, usually they will put their people in place at the Caisse de dépôt. And I remember a couple of years ago, we had a discussion about the mandate of the Caisse de dépôt. Is it to be very efficient and give the best return to Quebecers in their investment, or also to promote economic growth in Quebec? So now the Caisse de dépôt has a double mandate, but you have that political discussion, and we had that political discussion in Quebec. So it's the same thing for the Canadian Pension Plan. They have some mandates in the law. You can change that, and yes, the federal government will put people on the board that are in line with the mandate, that are in line with their ideas of the action of the plan. And actually, I don't like all these leftist ideology being part of capitalism. like die and all these crazy ideology. It must be based on being sure that the fund will give the best return on the investment. So actually, so it is the fund is independent in his day-to-day operation, but the federal government, that would be the same thing at the provincial level in Alberta. If you have your own pension plan, you'll have a legislation, you'll have a discussion about the mandate, and you'll be able to impose your point of view, your strategy or your vision for the plan, and after that they will do what they have to do in their day-to-day operation. So answering your question, they are independent in their day-to-day operation, but they must follow the legislation that is creating the Canadian Pension Fund, and that legislation has to be approved by Parliament. So politicians have a say in that.
Yeah, and that legislation right now is very anti oil and gas, and it certainly has been very hard on the Alberta economy. It is certainly being driven by diversity, equity, and inclusion. When you open up the Canada Pension Plan, the first thing you see is decarbonizing Canada. And I'm like, how is that, neutral and not political? And
Yeah.
for me, again, when you're looking at an investment, it's a risk benefit analysis. Is the management the best? Is it the return? Is it a sound, solid business? Not well, do we have 50% women and 20% brown, and these types of things, and they've crept in to the Canada Pension Plan, as they've crept into every other institution. And I really see this as an opportunity for Alberta to say, okay, we are going to back some of this out. Now, I mean, that's a decision and a discussion to see whether that would happen. But, I do see it as a probably the biggest opportunity Albertans have is to actually have a little bit more control over their own destiny.
Absolutely, Nadine. Absolutely. And, it's another reason why to have your own pension plan, because, like you just told me about, the fact that their oil and gas is a bad industry and they don't want to invest in that. Actually, in Alberta, that's important, but not only for Alberta, for all the country. When your industry is successful, it's good for Canada, actually. So yeah, it will be great to have your own pension plan only for that, to be able to say, okay, your investment policy must be that. You put that in legislation, and you be sure that the pension plan will give good returns to Albertan, but also to promote economic development in Alberta.
Yeah, I mean, at least not disqualify us
Yeah, yeah.
from investment dollars. I think that would be a positive. Now, some of the other things, and I mean, even Albertans are concerned about this perception of fairness, and treating Canada fairly. And I mean, for me, I look at it and I look at it from a legal, very factual perspective of, if this is the equation, this is what we're entitled to, then this is what we should take. And of course, every interview, whether it be CBC or CTV, it's all about, well, this is hardly fair. And I'm like, what has fairness got to do with this? I mean, nobody's really treated Alberta fairly here. And I don't think Alberta subsidizing, Canada, the rest of Canada, is actually fair.
Yeah.
So, how does this factor into the negotiation?
Yeah, actually, they're using everything to be sure that you won't have any support from other provinces, and but I believe that you will be able to have the support of the Quebec government. It would be very hard for the Quebec government to say no to you. You don't have the right to have your own pension plan when Quebec has its own since the beginning. So that being said, they're using all these arguments, but I'm using also the fairness argument in for example, in the equalization formula. I'm saying it is not fair for you guys. That equalization is too generous to other provinces. We must change the formula. So they try to say, oh, it won't be fair for other provinces. It's not fair toward you, not toward other provinces. And so let's have that discussion and put facts and data on the table, and people will be able to see. But right now, the federal government doesn't want to go that way, so we're going to use all these crazy arguments. But the fairness is on your side, like we just discussed. The Canadian Pension Plan won't invest in oil and gas industry. So that's a fact. And by doing that, it's not fair for your industry in Alberta.
Yeah. So, I mean, it was a very bold move, I think, on behalf of the government to release this and state they would have a referendum. I think it's really stirred the pot as far as emotions, as well as kind of how solid Canada truly is as a country, which that's a whole other conversation. But, I think now that it's on the table, I think Alberta needs to follow through. We need to have a referendum. And more importantly, we actually need to win this referendum. Whether we choose to do it is irrelevant, but we at least need to win the referendum. Because, in your opinion, what is now, if we were to lose this referendum, what would that mean? What impact would that have on Alberta?
But that will be only more difficult for you to have what you want. The federal government will use that against you. But that doesn't mean that you will be able to have what you want today, to have your own pension plan. Look, Quebec, we had a referendum on the sovereignty in the 1980s, and another one, and didn't win the first one, didn't win the second one, wants to interfere in provincial jurisdictions, is saying to Quebec, oh, if you don't want to be part of that, we won't interfere in your provincial jurisdictions in Quebec, but you're going to have a right to withdraw from that program. So it can happen. I hope you're going to win that referendum. You just have to build a strong case and being out there and promoting that idea to Albertans. And I believe that you can win the referendum, the first one. That will give you all the power that you need at the negotiation table. If you don't win, it won't be a win for that time. But you can have another referendum in 6 months, in a year. You never know, because if you don't win, the federal government will in that referendum, the federal government will take some position. And if the federal government is winning and you're not winning that referendum, so you'd be able to tell the federal government, you told us that during that referendum, and you're not delivering on that, because they won't deliver on what the federal government will tell you during that referendum. So if the federal government is not delivering, is not doing what he told you that he want to do during that referendum, you have an open case to do another referendum and to go back. So you cannot trust the federal government. You need to have your case, go there, have your referendum, win it. If you don't win it, use everything that the federal government said during that referendum against them, because they won't deliver.
I like the fact that you said that we cannot trust the federal government. And for me, some people look at the fact that, we are going to probably have a change of government in 2025, and that, maybe we can reform the CPP. But the problems that Alberta is experiencing is not just limited to the last, government. It goes back much further, including the conservative governments that we've had that have had opportunities to make changes that really didn't do so. And so I think, for Albertans, it is important that we say, you know what, okay, it's time to take back control of our own destiny, within the jurisdictions that we can, and not leave it to the federal government to do so. With that in mind, do you have any last sort of comments or thoughts that you want to share with Albertans as they weigh in on the pros and the cons as to whether or not they stay or they leave?
Yeah. First, have that referendum as soon as possible, and you have a good story for the population based on facts and reasons, and you can use a lot of example. So that, and I believe that you can win that. Second, about the federal government, Poliev may be, and I believe that if you look at the polls today, will be the prime minister in 2025. So he must take a position on that file. You must. We had a minority government in 2006 and another minority government in 2008. And in 2011, we had a majority government. So I was saying to myself at that time, okay, we'll be a real conservative government, we'll do real reform, privatization, deregulation, smarter government. But no, Harper did nothing. What is the legacy of Stephen Harper right now for Canadians? Nothing, zero. There's no legacy. So Harper did nothing. He had a majority because he wanted to be reelected and have another majority. So Poilievre will be the same. Poilievre may have a majority and he will to have the support in Vancouver, Toronto, and Quebec to be able to have another majority. So it's time to ask the real questions. And because you are supporting the Conservative Party of Canada for a long time, Poilievre is taking your support for granted. And actually, I can give you an anecdote. When I was a member of the Conservative Party of Canada, I was a minister, and I remember each time Trudeau had something that would be good for Eastern Canada and bad for Alberta, we had that discussion, a legislation, a regulation, or something like that. We had that discussion at the caucus. You know that all our your MPs coming from Alberta were conservative. So they were, standing up and raising and speaking about that proposal. Prime Minister, it would be good for Eastern Canada, but us in Alberta, it would be difficult to sell that policy. Our people don't want that. And the answer from Prime Minister Harper each time at the caucus was, you won with 65, 75% of the votes. So maybe next time you'll win with only 55 or 55 of 60% of the vote. You will win with maybe a smaller majority, but because of you, we'll be able to have more support in Quebec, in Ontario, and we will be in government. So that was, he was taking your vote for granted. So you must know that. And now, if you have Poilievre that is in your position, you must ask that question to Poilievre. Are you in favor of Alberta to have his own pension plan, its own pension plan? Yes or no? It's something like that. And you're going to know what to do in 2 years if he's saying no.
Well, Maxime, I know your time is tight. Thank you so very much, because I think for a lot of people, I can sit here and speak to a lot of this, especially from the investment side of it. But from the political side, there's so many games that are played, and there's so much manipulation of the facts and the truth. And then there is that fear mongering. I think it's really reassuring for Albertans to hear from somebody who is sat at that highest level of government, to know that, hey, this is possible. It is within your jurisdiction to do so. And I was going to put this forward as a risky question, but you've answered it numerous times. As the future Prime Minister of Canada, would you support the Alberta Pension Plan? And you've answered that as clear as day. So thank you again so much. We are going to have to do this again on some of the other hot topics that are just chasing the world in circles these days. It's going a little crazy. But thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Nadine. I appreciate that. And thank you for all the work that you're doing to be sure that, the federal government will respect Albertans. And you have a great file, a great battle in front of you, and you can win it. We have it in Quebec. You can have it, and you can always count on the People's Party to be on your side, because it will be good for Albertans, but it will be good for all the country at the same time. So thank you, Nadine. And yes, we'll be in touch another time. If you have another subject, I'll be ready to be with you and have another discussion. Thank you again.
Thank you, Maxime.